This lecture tries to unpack yet another label that one finds in the feminist movement. But perhaps, unlike the previous ones, of liberal and socialist Marxist feminism, anarcho-feminism is less talked about in both academic and activist circles. So, I will complement the definition with some historical examples of feminists supporting the anarchist doctrine, hoping to paint in this way a more vivid picture of the ideas and practical struggles associated with this label. Let's start with the first label, that of anarchism. Many anarchists have expressed hostility to fix the definition of the movement they were part of, but an approximate characterization might still be helpful, working as a launchpad for identifying some of the main features of the movement. For instance, Emma Goldman characterizes anarchism as the philosophy of a new social order based on liberty unrestricted by man-made law. So she sees it as the theory that all forms of government rest on violence and are therefore wrong and harmful as well as unnecessary. Expanding this definition, we can pick out some general features of anarchism. First, there is a commitment to individual freedom or liberty, full, absolute, and unrestricted. Anarchists are interested in both negative freedom, liberty, as the absence of restrictions, force, or domination by others. Although, unlike liberals, they have a distinctive socialist view of the conditions necessary to secure negative freedom, but they also are committed to positive freedom as freedom too, which is linked to an ideal of flourishing, self-realization and fulfillment. From this it follows that opposition to whatever is seen as incompatible with a commitment to individual freedom, such as threats or impediments or individual freedom, is also an important component of the anarchist thought. The main enemy of freedom in anarchist statements is variously identified as law, government, power, or domination, or even yet hierarchy, authority, and the state. In addition to viewing government and state as forms of violence, anarchists point out that they have a corrupting effect on those in privileged as well as subordinate positions within the structures in question. So anarchists are opposed to power in the sense of having power over. Power exercised by some over others, a power which always suppresses and restricts those others. They are not opposed to the idea of power too, in the sense of a capability or creative capacity. Anarchists are not interested in eliminating all influence of some person over others, or of completely eliminating unequal influence, since it seems inevitable that some individuals will be more persuasive than others, at least in some contexts. Anarchists also understand the idea of freedom as being conceptually bound with equality, so that one value implies the other, equal freedom of all individuals. Some extend this idea beyond adult human beings to children and non-human animals. So, compared to the liberal tradition, on the anarchist conception, freedom is not some good to be distributed or parceled out so that some might enjoy it while others are denied it. Instead, human beings are free when their relationships with one another are non-hierarchical. Therefore, anarchists are committed to bottom-up or decentralized and horizontal forms of organization as opposed to top-down, centralized or vertical form of control represented by the state. This implies that they support certain forms of social and political organization, including large-scale networks of small groups, where the network is connected horizontally rather than being held together by a central authority. Within small groups, a kind of direct democratic participation is favored on the anarchist theory. This will be facilitated by the group's small size. And also, there will be an emphasis on discussion and an avoidance of privileged leadership in favor of task rotation. So to sum up, anarchism is a view not about what it is to be done, but about who should decide what is to be done. Anarchism is the view that people should decide for themselves what to do, and not have it dictated to them from above. So what about anarcho-feminism? Is it like liberal feminism, a simple equation of adding feminism to the anarchist doctrine? There are historically close connections between anarchist ideas and feminism. With few exceptions, the anarchist tradition has been committed to the ideal of equality between sexes. Take Emma Goldman, very often seen as the founder of anarcho-feminism. She identifies patriarchy as one of the major structures to be opposed by anarchists, along with the state, religion, and property. She advocated women's education about contraception and spoke in favor of free love in late 19th century. So she has been an inspirational figure for the radical feminists in the 1960s and 70s. There have also been examples of the fusion of anarchist and feminist ideas in practice. The Mujeres Libres were an important presence during the Spanish Civil War, and they were committed equally to anarcho-syndicalism and to the empowerment of women. The term anarchist feminist, later used interchangeably with anarcho-feminism and anarcho-feminism, first appeared in an August 1970 issue of the Berkeley-based movement newspaper It Ain't Me Babe. The newspaper published an editorial calling for feminist anarchist revolution next to the article about Emma Goldman. In that article, Goldman was writing, "I demand the independence of woman, her right to support herself, to live for herself, to love whomever she pleases or as many as she pleases. I demand freedom for both sexes, freedom of action, freedom in love, and freedom in motherhood." Goldman encouraged women to make connections between radical feminism and anarchism, and her writings often served as radical feminist introduction to anarchism. Early anarcho-feminist theory emerged in a newsletter called The Siren. The first issue was produced as a journal in 1971 and contained the manifesto Who Are We?, the Anarcho-Feminist Manifesto, written by Arlene Wilson, a member of the Chicago Anarcho-Feminist Collective. This manifesto focused on distinguishing anarcho-feminism from socialist feminism through a critique of the state. Also, it's worth pointing out that the last number of the Siren, in 1973, so only 2 years later, contained 2 statements by transgender individuals, critiquing both sexism and the gender binary and offering a progressive vision of transgender inclusion within the movement. Anarcho-feminists are also known for forming small study groups, which acted as affinity groups that collectively participated in action around various local and national issues, from the local food co-op to international political prisoner support to the lesbian movement to ecology struggles and the anti-nuclear movement. So anarcho-feminists in practice work in a variety of movements and brought their ideas to a very diverse audience. Also, their focus on education allowed them to develop their own autonomy and talents. However, these diverse activities and the changing nature of these collectives explain why anarcho-feminism is almost always ignored by historians, and documents and records of these collectives are very often difficult to find. The standard historical narrative is that the small group organization characteristic of anarcho-feminism dissolved at the end of the 70s under the pressure of liberal feminists to organize larger, structured movements to bring about legal and economic changes. However, this negates the crucial contributions of anarcho-feminists who continue to organize within small, decentralized, and leaderless feminist collectives throughout the 80s. Some feminists extended this small group structure to a variety of other projects, such as domestic violence shelters, living collectives, and periodicals which discuss social and political issues affecting the specific groups of women. We can ask whether the relationship between anarchism and feminism is a natural organic one, or whether it has been forced from one camp to the other. First of all, it should be noted that anarchism has a sort of open-ended structure which gives it affinities with any movement against oppression, like anti-racism or anti-colonialism. But it does share with feminism this concern with the personal and the everyday, and a recognition of oppression and domination within these spheres, as well as an emphasis upon changing the whole public and private life. Anarchists have consistently claimed that their position is not only a form of socialism, but rather is the truest form, the one which most faithfully and correctly draws out the consequences of central socialist principles. We can see that from the beginning of the movement, when anarcho-feminists differentiated themselves from traditional male socialist left. For instance, in a 1971 article, again the first issue of the Siren newsletter, Arlene Wilson emphasized that anarcho-feminists are all socialists. She also said, "We love our Marxist sisters and have no interest in dissociating ourselves from their constructive struggles." Then in 1974, Black Rose anarcho-feminist Marian Layton commented that socialist feminism is not narrowly dogmatic or opportunistic like that of traditional male Marxists. Rather, it could be included in an anarcho-feminist analysis. So again, the emphasis on continuity between the socialist movement and the anarchist movement. Ehrlich, 1977, argued that it was feminist unfamiliarity with anarchism that led them to embrace Marxism, although their ideology was always skeptical of any social theory that comes with a built-in set of leaders and followers, like most interpretation of Marxists at the time. So for many feminists involved in the movement, not only was it the case that socialism implies anarchism, but anarchism was seeking to imply socialism as well. However, this does not completely cancel the practical conflict between those who say that we must seize the state through means which mimic its structure, and those who say that we must abolish it through means which more closely resemble the sort of society we would like to bring about. In other words, there were both practical and theoretical differences among anarcho-feminists about whether the small group structure suffices to fight the problems that general hierarchical structures of domination produce for specific groups. Contrary to popular belief, though, all social anarchists are socialists. All feminist anarchists are socialists. That is, they want to take the wealth out of the hands of the few and redistribute it among all members of the community. They also believe that people need to cooperate with each other as a community instead of living as isolated individuals, which seems to be the more general picture promoted under political liberalism. So to sum up, remember, what we said characterizes anarchism is, as a mode of thought, are the following ideas: a distrust of hierarchy and domination wherever it might appear, a correspondingly broad conception of the political, a fluidity and open-endedness as to one's political vision, and a commitment to universal interrogation, including the relentless interrogation of ourselves. Viewing anarchism as a political philosophy and as a practical movement against all forms of structured domination, coercion, and control highlights the continuities between anarchism and the feminist movement. While some anarcho-feminists claim that women are natural anarchists, positioning feminists as an untapped revolutionary force, neither the feminist movement, in its very different incarnations, nor the women in it, always acted anarchistically. It's also the case that some feminists might act as anarchists in small group types of organizations without an awareness of their anarchist commitments. The anti-authoritarian current that runs through both historical and contemporary forms of anarcho-feminist movements is general enough to mean that women can self-organize and build an agenda of political actions around the ideals of sisterhood, ecology, race, and class solidarity. Finally, while anarchism is now often thought of as having more in common with right-wing free market politics than with socialism, due to a shared hostility to state control, anarchists have traditionally regarded their position as incompatible with the proprietarian system of power and domination associated with the capitalist mode of production.